Tim Pines and I have been having breakfast this morning, and we're talking about coaching. We want to begin to put up on the blog what we'll call coaching tips. And we're starting out with one, thinking of the question of if somebody's just starting to coach for the first time, they've never done it before, what are some of the things that they need to know? And the first thing that came to my mind is the concept of prevenience, which we've talked about before. But basically, prevenience is the belief that God is always before. He's always at work in a situation before we show up. And I think that's absolutely foundational for coaching. What it means is that if I'm coaching somebody, my basic assumption is God's already at work in their life. They may or may not be aware of how that is. But so my job as a coach is to help them begin to see what it is that God's doing. And how do I do that? And well, let me say, first of all, that assumption of prevenience takes all the pressure off of me. So it's not like I have to be really smart or really brilliant or figure out some way to really help this person on my own. Mainly what I want to do is get them connected with what God's up to in their life. So how do I do that? I think primarily two ways, by asking questions and then by listening really well. Questions. What are some of the questions that I would ask? A lot of them are just very simple, like, what's your sense of what God is saying to you these days? What is your sense of what God's up to? They may or may not have thought about that. They may or may not have an answer right away. But simply by asking that question, it begins to get them thinking about those subjects. If a person doesn't have an answer, I don't know what God's saying to me these days. One of the things you can do in that context is simply say, how about if we take some time to listen together right now? Let's just take 5 or 10 minutes. Maybe it's on the phone, maybe it's in person. And why don't you ask the Lord that question? What do you want to say to me these days? What are you trying to do in my life? And then we pay attention to the spontaneous thoughts that come to mind. So those are some of the things that are just starting places, but can be very powerful, very transformational in a very simple kind of a way.
Coaching involves a shift of mindset or a worldview, a paradigm shift. I think for a lot of us, if we're honest, most of what ministry has involved has been about pouring into, about giving people something that they need, that they didn't have previously, and making sure that they get it in them. Coaching begins with the belief that the Spirit, it's what John has said before about prevenience, that God is at work, that the Spirit is present. And so coaching is less about pouring into and more about drawing out of. So if it's about me pouring into somebody, that creates a lot of anxiety for me because I have to do a really good job of communicating in it a way that helps them to get it. I have to, it becomes more about me in some ways. How good am I at getting this into people? Coaching's less about that. It's more about believing that God is prevenient and asking questions and just being curious. So I wonder what God, what is the Spirit asking you to focus on in this season of your life? And then I'm listening. And then every now and then I'm just sort of summarizing what I'm hearing. So what I hear you saying is...
So restating is an important part of this whole thing.
It is, yeah, restating it. And in restating it, I might say, what I hear you saying is, that they may say, no, it's more like this. Or they may say, yeah, now that you say it that way, that is kind of what's going on. And so it helps them to see it by me helping them to name it. And so I can relax and I can say, there's something that God's already doing here, and all I'm doing is just listening and helping it to surface, helping the Spirit to bring it to mind so that we can name it together. And when I come in with that perspective rather than the pouring into perspective, I'm able to relax more and just be in a curious place.
That's good. Tim, talk about some of the questions that you start out with when you're coaching somebody. What are some of the questions that kind of help people think about what you might want to do coaching on?
Yeah, some of the questions that I'll begin with, or I'll ask a person to come to the call with, are what is your sense of what the Holy Spirit wants you to focus on this call? Or what is the Spirit having you focus on in this season of your life? What's the theme that keeps emerging? What is it that we need to talk about so that when the call ends 50 minutes or an hour from now, you're able to say it was a powerful conversation? So you're sitting in your study at home, and the call's at 10 a.m. and at 11 o'clock you're going to get off the call and you're going to walk out into the kitchen, and your spouse is going to say, "How was the call?" And you're going to say, "It was a really powerful call." What did we need to talk about in order for you to be able to say that? So those are some questions.